Rev up your engines! Now, I've been working on cars for over 51 years. It'll be 52 in exactly a week from today. So you can imagine, I've heard a lot during those 51 years. Now, here's things that I heard from customers that it's better not to say such things to a mechanic. No one should waste anyone's time, but you want to spend a little bit of time explaining the whole problem, and then the mechanic explaining, okay, let me analyze this, then I'll tell you the steps I'm going to do to fix it. Now, the last thing you want to say to a professional mechanic who's good at his job is, oh, I'm in no hurry to get my car back. Take your time. Never say that to a really good mechanic. People used to say that all the time to my grandfather, who was also a mechanic. Was that a mistake? Because good mechanics, guess what? They have work all the time. So if you say you're in no hurry, probably everybody else coming in says, can you fix it as fast as you can? I got to get back on the road. You don't want your car on the back burner. I've seen cars at other mechanic garages that have been there for months, and I'll say, what are you still doing? That clunker sitting there. I said, the guy said he wasn't in any big hurry, so I'm in no big hurry fixing it. Don't ever say that to a mechanic if you want your car fixed in a reasonable amount of time. Now, number 2 on the list is, do not lie to your mechanic because you feel stupid because you did something that damaged your car. I don't care what you did to your car. I just want to be able to analyze the problem and fix it as quickly as possible. So don't have me going down rabbit holes in the wrong direction looking for a problem that I can figure out right away. If you would have said, oh, you know, I ran into a curb last night and all this problem started after I ran into the curb. Now, if you ever had anything like that happen and you don't tell the truth to your mechanic, most mechanics these days charge $100 plus an hour for working on your car. You're going to be wasting a lot of money. And we don't waste any of our time or your money trying to figure out what's wrong. I've had many times customers tow cars over here. What happened to the car? And they say, oh, I don't know. It just stopped running while I was driving it. Realize there's a zillion things that can do that. Test, I'll say, hey, you know, give me the exact scenario. Then they broke down and admitted to me they overheated it on the highway. They only had a couple miles to go home, so they kept driving until the car didn't run anymore. So I knew they'd probably blown the engine. I checked the engine. Sure enough, the engine was blown. They needed a new engine. They shouldn't have wasted my time checking a million things when they could have just told me what happened, and I would have done one test on the engine and said, you wrecked your engine. Now what do you want to do? Because a really good mechanic is busy all the time. He doesn't want to waste time on things that are unnecessary. So always tell the truth about your car so he can figure it out as fast as he possibly can without having to be Sherlock Holmes and start analyzing a million things to get down to the one thing that actually is the problem. Now, the next thing not to say to a mechanic is, don't tell a mechanic that you know all about cars and that you just don't have any time to work on your own car, so you're bringing it to him, when in fact you really don't know much about cars at all. You've never worked on cars. Don't do that. Because any good mechanic's smart enough to know if somebody really knows about cars or not. It's more of a humorous thing, really, but I had a customer and he says, oh, Scotty, a guy told me about you. I fix my own cars, but I don't have time anymore because I'm bartending all the time. Can you work on my car? I said, sure, I worked on his car. Since he was a bartender, I went with the wife to the bar and he was making us these French 75 howitzers. And I said, Bob, why did you tell me that you worked on your own car and you didn't have any time? He said, well, Scott, he says, I was afraid you're a rip-off mechanic and you were going to rip me off, so I pretended that I worked on cars so you wouldn't try ripping me off. And I just laughed and said, Bob, I know you didn't know anything about cars just by talking to you, you know? It doesn't matter to me. Tell them the truth. Don't make up crazy stories, because we mechanics can figure out pretty fast what you know about cars and not. Leave it to the professional, but give them all the information that you possibly can about your problem. But don't throw any lies in. This isn't a murder mystery where you're the murder suspect and you're trying to throw the detectives off your trail. Tell the truth about everything that you know is wrong with your car, because really, you drive your car 99.9% of the time. I spend a very little amount of time driving other people's cars unless it's a really messed up problem. Then I gotta hook up my fancy scan tool, drive it around, hope that the problem reoccurs, then analyze the data. You can cut through a lot of that crap if you pay close attention to your car, and then when you have a problem, explain, okay, this only happens when I'm going 55, or this only happens when it's raining, or this only happens first thing in the morning. Keep that information so you can tell the mechanic, so he can get rid of all the ancillary information that he doesn't need and get down to the rabbit hole where the problem exists. And perhaps one of my all-time stupid things that I'm told time and time again is somebody will bring in a car and they'll say, oh, well, I'm only keeping this car for another month or two, so I don't want to spend much money fixing it. So, you know, I don't want to do anything that's really expensive. But in reality, you plan on driving the car for years more. I've had a few customers, mind you, if they're obnoxious enough, I'll just stop working on their cars. But I've had a few over the years that would do that. And then you see them a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, sometimes even 5 years later, driving the same car that they said they were only going to drive another month or so. Because an honest mechanic will tell you the truth about a car, what you're planning on using it for, and what you need to fix. You get an old car, like my old Celica, it shakes at idle when it's in drive, especially with the AC on. It's always done that since I bought it with 200,000 miles on it. Did I ever fix it? No. And the reason I didn't fix it is because all you gotta do is flip it into neutral with the AC on or off, and it idles like a dream. That tells me there's either a weakness in the torque converter inside the automatic transmission, or the transmission itself is a little bit worn. But it shifts perfectly fine. I don't take it on trips to California. From Texas to California, it's no big deal. And 10 years later, it still runs perfectly fine. It just shakes too much when you put it in drive or reverse, only when you're idling. Then you put it in neutral, stop shaking, runs smooth as can be. An honest mechanic is going to tell you what actually needs fixing and what doesn't need fixing. Every year, this happens scores of times. Somebody comes in, friend told them about me, and they got a laundry list like this of $3,500 worth of work that the dealer told them they need to do on their car. So if they're a new customer, I put on my fancy scan tool, check absolutely everything, jack it up, check the suspension, wheels, brakes. And a lot of times I tell these people, you know, you really don't need to do anything to your car at all other than change the oil in it. Now, of course, mechanics shouldn't say stupid things to their customers. Of course, they shouldn't be dishonest and lie and say you need this and that and everything else. You shouldn't have a mechanic who's always trying to sell you things that you don't necessarily need, or that can go for quite a long period before they need replaced. Years ago, I got one of these picoscopes that's in this freeze frame oscilloscope. You hook it up to your laptop and you can analyze electronics. It's a great device, but some people take them too far. I checked the graph I had against good ones and bad ones, and it said, oh, that one's on its way out, it's almost gone, you need to replace the electric fuel pump. Mind you, the vehicle was running perfectly fine as it was. I just decided, hey, here's some new technology, I'll try it out. So I told the customer, I said, you know, your car's running fine, I did this test, and it says your fuel pump's on its way out. If you want to do some proactive stuff, you can change it, but since it's running okay, you know, I mean, you can do whatever you want. So when he found the cost, changing out the fuel pump, he said, I'll wait till the stupid thing breaks. Because he only used it as an in-town commuting car, it was an old beater car, and he had AAA towing, so if it ever did break, it didn't cost him anything, he could tow it over here and I'd fix it. But 3 years later, he's still driving the car, and the fuel pump was still humming along and it ran fine. So, sometimes you can take this technology too far and start selling things to people that really might last quite a bit longer before they're going to break down. Now you know some dumb things not to say to a mechanic and how to successfully interact with a mechanic so that you get your car fixed as soon as possible without wasting his time or your money looking for a problem that can easily be figured out if the truth is told in the first place. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.